All right, good afternoon. Um, Let me make sure the recorder's starting. Yep. So, welcome back to our weekly sort of deep dive on a Centro project. So in this case, we created this ability to have a approval process surface in Slack, meaning a person in Salesforce can send an approval over to somebody in Slack, either in a public channel or a DM, and then that will surface as a message with a button, and the approver will either press the approve or reject button, and from there, that will send a message back to Salesforce, update the record that it was approved. You can see in this example, I've got some approval fields on this project that we'll capture from the Slack button press. So like the Slack user ID, the approval ID, when it was approved, etc. And we're going to do this using Salesforce Flow. So we'll have the audibility. We'll make it really easy for someone to submit for approval. Here, I've got this little button here. And we'll make it really easy for the approver to accept or reject the request in Slack. So a use case here that I've heard quite a bit is think of a busy executive, and they have a bunch of approval requests coming into them via Salesforce. So people send them an email, or you can set up an approval process in Salesforce to send the executive an email. They have to log into Salesforce, press the button, fill out their comments, and it will eventually get approved. A much snappier process would just to have that surface in Slack where they can quickly press the button, review the details really quickly, and they can do that in the Slack app on their desktop or on their phone really, really fast. And what's cool about this particular process is the Salesforce user could be inactive, or they may not have a Salesforce user ID period, or a Salesforce login. That's kind of common, where maybe an executive doesn't log into Salesforce that often, or maybe they want to save on the license cost and they don't give them a seat. Like, but in my mind, capturing the user ID from Slack and the user name from Slack and the timestamp increase that audibility just like you would have in Salesforce. And Slack's very secure in that sense. So, all right, let's get started. So first of all, there's some setup things here that I want to point out. So on this particular, so what I'm going to be doing is submitting requests from this project object. It's a custom object I created, and you can see I put some fields on here. Let's take a look at them. Okay, so in this case, I created these custom fields here called approval status. This is a pick list with some values of pending, submitted, approved, rejected. And I've got a Slack approver Slack ID. And notice that this is just a text field. This will be coming in from the Slack user ID or member ID from the button press. And, just make this field read-only for everyone except an admin, right? So then we've got you can't change it once it's set. And we've got, some other approved field. The data was approved, the data was submitted, the final approver field. This will come from the Slack user ID, which is a little funny looking. I think it's the first part of the email that they registered with. So if my email was ryan.hitchler@centro.rocks, then that would show up as ryan.hitchler. Okay, so we've got our fields on our object to store the approvals in this custom object. One thing to note from last time, we talked about having this custom field that we ship with called on the user table. So It's called Slack member ID. We'll be using that to actually reference the user. Again, in this use case, you don't have to have this because we'll be capturing the Slack user ID of whoever pressed the button. So they may not have a user in here, but for sake of the flow, let's create an inactive user for this case. So we have Riley Johnson, and got a email address here. All right, and it doesn't really matter. This could be a chatter-free person. I think that looks good. And one thing that I am going to put in here is their Slack user ID, so I can reference it in my flow. Now, again, you don't have to have this to get going. All right, so we've got our user. I'm just going to actually make this inactive just to prove a point. Okay. Shouldn't matter. I mean, it's chatter free, so it's a free license anyway. Okay. So we got our user, Riley. This is going to be our person we're going to be sending the approval to. All right, so let's create a new project to work against. By the way, welcome to the stream. If you have any questions, pop them in the chat and I'll try to answer them as I'm going along here. Let's do a new project. I'll call this Twitch Project 2. I'll set it to an account. Doesn't really matter. The start date we'll set just for posterity. And the project end date. Okay, so defaults to the pending status for the approval, and we'll leave all these blank. All right, so now we've got our record we're going to play against. Now I'm going to go into flows and start building out my flow here. Now I've set one up beforehand, so I'm going to have to inactivate that flow just so it won't trigger. All right, I think I called it something funky. Yeah, I messed up the label here. Centro Costume Approvals. So let's deactivate this one. And we'll go ahead and do a new flow. All right, this will be an auto launch flow. Again, this is necessary, like I talked about the last time, to have a pause event from the button press in Slack because we don't know when that button press will happen. And so we got to have a pause event to wait for that platform event to come back to resume the rest of the flow. Now, what's nice about auto launch is you can trigger it off of other things like a process builder or a screen flow, which I'll show later. I'm going to build a little button, or maybe I'll use the pre-existing one. This is not that interesting, but a little screen flow button to start the flow. Could be anything though, right? It could be, you know, maybe some status changes on the record to start the process, like a discount approval or something like that. Okay, so auto launch flow. Let's get started. I always do the auto layout. I just like to have it organize itself. It is a little buggy, I've noticed, but I'm used to it. So and it gives some niceties like the little add an element button really quick. All right, so first things first, let's create some variables. The very first thing we're going to need is we're going to need a project ID. We'll call this var project ID. Let's call this a text, and it's going to be coming from something else, right? So from the screen flow, it's going to be setting the project ID. All right, so we got to make that available for input to this flow, and that'll be nice for debugging at least. Let me just get my Slack ready here. Okay, so now next thing I want to do is start getting some project fields from this project we're pulling from. So we'll do a get records. We'll call this get project fields, and we'll call this. Find the. I made a custom object called project. There's task array project in here like I showed last time. So obviously we could do it against there too, but we'll use our custom object here today. All right, so now we need to match against the inbound or the incoming project ID that was set from the input variable. And that will be set to our var project ID. We'll grab all the fields, not sorted because it's only one record, and we'll hit done. All right. Now, we're going to have to, we're going to send a message to a channel. So we'll use again our Centro send a message, a record notification to Slack. And while that's loading up, let me show you. I've got a, where'd it go? Oh, here it is. I've got a user, Riley, who we'll be testing against here. So here's her Slack, and I'm going to send it to this projects channel. Okay, so let's move that over. We'll call this send approval message, and we're going to post it to the projects channel. Excuse me. Again, I could DM the person, right? I could check this variable, pull the user ID of the person we're going to send to, and send it directly to her. Maybe we'll do that if we have time today. I know it's already 10 minutes in, so I better kind of hustle here. And we'll just say, hello, we need your approval to move forward. I'm going to merge in a user ID here in a second, but I just want to test that this at least this piece is working. All right, so we got the post user records. Again, this is going to post the record details using the compact layout of the project. And I'm going to use the project ID variable I set from the beginning. I'm going to create two buttons. I'm going to call one approved. We have this API name, which I'll use later. And then if they press the button, I want the message to disappear. So we're going to check that. Excuse me, my throat's a little scratchy today. All right, so then publish a platform event. Again, that's going to send it back to Salesforce when they press the button with a package of information that will be able to extract and store in Salesforce. And then it says require authentication. Normally this is checked by default, meaning you know, you need a Salesforce login to do this button press. In this case, I'm going to uncheck it because our approver may not have a Salesforce login, but that's okay because we are capturing all that information in the platform event, and we're going to store it in Salesforce so we know who did what. And then we'll create another button here called rejected. And again, same thing. I'm going to delete it and publish a platform event and not require authentication. Actually, yeah, we'll do that. I was going to do a little test to show you that a little warning would show in Slack, hey, you're not authorized to Salesforce yet. I just don't know if I have time for it. Okay, seems pretty good. Let's save it and test it. We'll call this Twitch approvals in Slack. Twitch Salesforce approvals in Slack. All right, and again, like last time I talked about, I learned this lesson to always debug, not to just run off the end-to-end test off the record. So we'll be filling the project ID to this debug event. Okay, so what's going to debug is going to ask for a variable project ID. There's the input variable. Let me grab it from our test project and hit run. I'll pull over our Slack window. And it was so fast I couldn't even show it here. So here it came over. Hello, we need your approval to move forward. Here's the record detail for our project, right? Twitch Project 2. Here's the opportunity, the start and close date. Then here's our 2 buttons. All right, so these do nothing right now, right? Because I haven't wired them up to anything. So I could hit approved and it's just going to close the message. Looking good. Let's build a little more into this. Okay. Whoops. Close that. Now, let's do a little more sophistication here. Let's go grab that. Let's go get a new variable for a Slack ID. Variable var Slack member approver. And we'll do a text and hit. I could go do, I'm worried about time here. So I could go grab and do logic to go grab the right Riley from Salesforce. Just for sake of time, you can go build that logic and maybe I'll do another webcast, but I'm just gonna default it to her member ID. So in Slack, to get every, they assign a unique user ID to every profile or to every member. And you can get to it by clicking the member's view profile. And then you click more and then copy member ID. By the way, I use this I use this thing called this is not a real person, to use these avatars for this test workspace, or this demo workspace. And I can tell it's always the lips, right? The gap between the lips and the teeth just does not look natural. Anyway, maybe I'll show you that sometime. It's a nice service though, to create avatars without copyright restrictions. It's nice. And they look pretty real when it's a tiny little avatar. I'm fooled. All right, so let's do the default value. And that's our Slack user ID. So we've got our variable. We're going to then update this message. Hello. And how we do a message to Slack, it requires this carets plus the @ symbol. They're not brackets. They're greater than less than signs with the @ symbol, and then we'll insert our. I didn't place it where I wanted to. That's okay. I'll just copy Control X that and paste that in there. Okay, so that should alert Riley that we need her approval. Let's test that again. You're probably gonna get bored of me testing, but I like to make sure every little addition is working correctly. Hey, there it goes. Hey, Riley Johnson, we need your approval. Perfect. And just clear that out. All right, so now let's do, okay, so depending on what happens, they press either approve or rejected, right? We need to update, we should probably update the approval status right after we send the message and we're waiting for the event to come back. We had 4 statuses in that approval field, right? We had pending, submitted, approved, rejected. So the moment the message sends out, we should update the status to be submitted, right? Let's do that. It's a little nicety, but I think it's kind of good to have that logic built in so people know what's going on. All right, so let's go ahead and update records. We'll call this update approval status submitted. Okay. Specify the conditions to identify the record. So now again, project. We've got the project ID, so let's just use that. Project ID. Then we're going to submit the approval status equals submitted. All right, so now when the message goes out, if I refresh this record, I should see it as set to submitted, not pending, right? Let's see that work. Should have this in my clipboard. All right, perfect. Oh, yeah. Let's see. Should say. There it goes. Submitted. Perfect. All right, nice. Let's go back, reset our data, and let's keep going. So the next thing I want to do is wait for that event, right? So we're going to pause the flow. We're going to call this, I don't know, wait for approval. All right, so we're going to have a few conditions here, right? So this condition will be approval button pressed. And the resume event will be a platform. Again, from last time, we're using the platform event, sending back from Slack to Salesforce. And this is always going to be the central action. And the conditions are going to be twofold. One, we're going to use the central interview GUID equals the flow GUID. There we go. So that way we match to make sure whatever flow interview is running, we are assured that we capture the right one. And now we will use which API name. Remember that was set in the button. In this case, we don't get that in this, so we have to remember. I just remember it was called approved. Now let's store the output variable in a new resource of type record, because the platform event comes back as a record. This is going to be var button info. And the object is central action. And done. So this will capture and store in a variable all that metadata about the user who pressed it, their user ID, namely their user ID and their username, because we're going to store that in Salesforce. Now let's go ahead and do let's do the reject event since we're in here. Reject button pressed. All right, so resume event, sorry, platform event, centro, same conditions. Rejected this time. Hope that's what I called it. I think it was. Interview GUID is the flow GUID. The platform event is the one we just set up. Button info. I don't think, okay, that's fine. All right, so like we learned last time, you gotta have something under each one of these configuration, in these paths, you gotta have something. So it's a little, let's just go ahead and do the update. We're going to update update approval fields. Okay, again, we're going to use the projects. And we're going to use, okay, we're going to set the status first. Oh, sorry. This is the filter. So the ID equals, where's our variable? Project ID. All right, so we're going to set a few fields at once. The approval status is going to be set to approved. Let's do another one. Let's see, the Slack ID, approver Slack ID. This should be set in our record, button info. And we've got Centro user ID. Slack member ID, perfect. Add a field. Approver, sorry, let's see what we got here. Date approved. And that is the, I could probably use the create date from the button, and I probably should. I probably could use the flow interview as well, but I'll just go ahead and use this. Since it's coming from the platform event. Maybe there'd be a delay on the flow interview, so we want to capture exactly when that platform event was fired. That makes more sense to me. All right, so now we've got, let's see, final approver. So this is going to be that unique ID field, and this is going to be like the readable name field. All right, so username. All right, looks good. Let's do the same on the rejected. Date rejected fields. You know what I didn't do this time is I like to have that Notion doc to track how I'm doing. My kids are on spring break, so I didn't have a lot of time this morning to put that together because they're going to go spend a night at their grandparents' house, give their parents a night off. All right, so let's see here. Specify the conditions. We're going to use the project. Whoops, dang it. Project. And the ID field is going to be our variable. And let's go set all these again. So the approval status this time is going to be rejected. The date approved. I don't know if I love that label. This is the date it was rejected. Again, we're going to grab the created date and final approver Slack ID. Let's go grab that. Last but not least, the final approver friendly name, username. Again, I don't love those labels now that I already created them, but that's okay. It should be obvious from the status. All right, let's try it. Create a new version, activate, debug. Project ID. All right, let's run it. Let's see if Riley got the message here. Oh, there it is. Okay, now let's go see first Happy Path approved. Did it update what we wanted it to? Perfect. Approved. The date it was approved. I forgot something. In the first update element, I could have updated the date it was submitted. I'll do that in a second. Here's our approval, Slack ID. And remember, if I wasn't an admin, all these fields would be read-only. But because I'm in debug mode, and I'm kind of building this out, now I can go test. I can go set them back to what we want. Pending. Let's clear this. My magic mouse died this morning too, so I'm using the keyboard and mouse on my laptop, which isn't the funnest. All right, so now we've got that back set. Let's go update this real quick. We want two fields to be set, right? So we want the date submitted to be the flow current date. Yeah. All right, perfect. Now, what do we want to do? I kind of want to send a message back to the Slack channel informing the team what the decision was. That seems nice. Like, we submitted in Slack. We expect the approver to be in Slack. We want the whole channel to see if it was approved or rejected. So that's good. Let's go. First of all, let's go set a message first. New central message. Approved message. So this is set on either path. So I'm gonna have to use some variables here in a second. So we're gonna post to our channel again. What's cool is like we could be really sophisticated here and send a DM back to the original submitter that their approval was that their request was approved as a variable to their DM. Maybe I'll do that at some point. Let's see. Projects channel. Where is it? Okay. This request was blank, right? I need some variables to go fill that in. Unfortunately, we can only use the local resources. We can't use we can't use you know how Salesforce has those elements that say get records, and that's stored as a variable you can go pull from. You can't do that. You have to use the local resource variables. So we'll go have to create some more variables to make this nice. The request was blank, meaning rejected or approved. This was done by blank. We'll use the friendly name. And then in parentheses, we'll say Slack ID, Slack user ID, blank. We'll go fill these blanks in a second. On date. I don't think we'll post the record details this case, but we will make a custom button to close. And all this is going to do is just delete the message. It's not going to do anything else. All right, so now we got to go, let's go create our resources. So we'll say variable var, what do we need? We need the Slack approver. Approver friendly name or username. I don't love that variable name. Text. Done. New resource var Slack approver member ID, text, done. New resource, variable, var, let's see, username, I need the date, right? Var date, approved. This will be a date. Seems fine. And new resource var. What's the last one? Oh, status. Slack approval status. Sorry about that beeping. It's my okay. Okay, so now let's see here. We've got text status, right? All right. So now let's go. We're gonna do we're gonna do a get record. So we'll get project approval fields rather than get them from. I could get them from the platform event, but since they're stored on the Salesforce record, I kind of want to make sure that the Salesforce record data is in place that will send over to Slack. I don't want like a weird loop where like it didn't actually save to Salesforce. I want the confirmation to come from the Salesforce field updates. If that makes sense. So we'll say project. Well, we only have one, so this has been nice this time. Equals, as opposed to last time, which I would remember. If you remember, kept having to look up different objects all over the place. It's been pretty streamlined this time. All right, we're going to store and assign variables. This is a nice feature of this element. We'll do separate variables, and then I'm just going to manually set each one. So the approval status is going to show up in our new variable. The field from the record, the date approved, will show up in our new variable. And we need our approval Slack ID. Member ID. And final approval will go to our username. All right, perfect. Now let's go merge those back into our message here. So the first one is the status, right? So our status, oh, dang it. Request was blank. I'm gonna do a little nicety here. I'm gonna use this. If you put the asterisk around something in Slack, that's the markdown notation for bold. So we're gonna say the request was approved or rejected. This was done by. Doesn't matter here. So username. And then in parentheses, and another nicety, we'll use this underscore around that variable to do a italicized notation. And Slack user ID, we will use our variable member ID. And then we need our date, right? Date approved. Oh, perfect. All right, let's see how it looks. Activate, debug. Ah, dang it. Lost my ID from my clipboard. All right, so now we got our project ID. We'll run it. All right, Now let's try our rejected. Okay, cool. So the request was rejected. This was done by Riley Johnson, Slack ID blah, on March 24th, 2021. Nice. Now we should see that reflected in the record, of course, because I'm pulling straight from the record. Yep. Now it might be a nice, nicety to have a button here that says, like, view the record, right? So let's close that. So I will put one more button on there. View record. Right. And so in this case, I'm going to use a URL. Now, this of course means that the person clicking the URL must have a Salesforce login. That's okay. So we don't want to hard code this ID, but as you saw, I just grabbed the URL from our record. We're going to place in our project ID. Whoops. Okay. I'm not going to delete the message this time. I'm assuming like you might want to have a conversation about it in Slack. All right, let's try it. Oh my God, I forgot to record it. That sucks. Too bad, I'll have to do it again, I guess. It'll be less ums and uhs. All right, so here's our rejected. We should see a view. Something get hung up here. Oh, sorry, just took a second. Interesting. What happened? Let me just clear out this test data. Let's try that one more time. I think I changed anything, did I? All right, so now we'll hit debug, project ID. What did I screw up? Let's see if I can debug this. Did it record? Huh. Didn't do any of those things. Let's see here. Was it adding that button? How could that be? And that's the only thing I changed, so we just copy that. We're going to delete it. Let's see if we can get it back to a working state. all the unfurling stuff got caught. All right, so let's do this. And let's try this again. Okay. Weird. Let's try adding it back. Copy this URL again. Well, did not do that well, did it? Let's try to add our resource back in. Or a variable, I mean. Whoops, X. Paste. Done. Let's clear our fields. Pending. Clear that, clear that, clear that, clear that, save. Okay. Ooh, activate. Maybe that was the problem. I didn't activate last time. Let's double check that I got it in there. Yep. All right, let's try it. That has happened to me quite a bit where I forget to save and activate the updated flow, and I'm running a flow version several back that isn't what I expected. So that could have easily happened. All right, let's hit rejected. Request was rejected. This was done by Riley. Let's hit view record. This is going to prompt for a login, which I should have my keychain all set up here. Safari. Perfect. Okay, so in about, what was that, 45 minutes? We have done the following. We've created a Slack approval process. We've made it really, oh, sorry. Let's do one last thing. Let's link it up to our record. So like I said, I don't think I'll have time to do this, but what I will do is show you in Flow. I created this screen flow and added it to that project. So here it is. Let me show what it looks like. Send project approval screen. That's from the button click. So when you press this button, you'll see what it does. We're going to set the record ID from the project it started from, pass that to our approval. This was my test approval, so let me edit this. We'll point it to our... that's right. I made a little comments thing too. Let's do this. Subflow. And this is called Twitch. Approvals in Slack. Okay, so what this should do is call our flow here. Activate, and let's clear our field so we can make sure it works. Again, I can go through the detail of setting up that screen flow on another one if anyone's interested. It's pretty basic though. It's just this button. So then I modified the actions on this Lightning page layout to use this send for approval, and hit next. So then that should fire off our button. There it is. What was nice about this, and I forgot to include it in the flow I just built out, is another input variable called comments. So you saw that on that first screen that you can submit comments to the as well. So hey, we need this project done fast, or whatever your rationale is, and then I merged that into the message as well. So we could do that maybe next time, and of course now we are in our flow, so this should work just like we thought. And that is it. Okay, so what we did was created a approval process with the fields necessary and the way to kick off the process from Salesforce to send an approval to a Slack user who may or may not have a Salesforce ID. Then that sent back the metadata of the Slack user who pressed the button, updated Salesforce, and we sent a message back that it was done with some nice view records. So okay, bummer I didn't record this, so I guess I'm going to do it again here in a little bit. Maybe I'll even speed it up a little, because this is pretty simple once you have everything kind of set up and ready to go. And as you saw, I mean, we make it really nice and easy to do with the platform ID or the platform event records to quickly keep all that stuff synced up. All right, well, thanks everyone, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye.